Welcome back to Coffee Talk. Oh God, it's going to be a hard day today. May God give me strength. Today's class is about strength, gevurah. We've spoken about different midot over the last several weeks and about how what we're actually aiming for in every single midah is balance. How do I find balance through the midot? So this particular trait, gevurah, strength, is an important one because it's not what you think it is. When we talk about perseverance, we talk about finding balance in our lives. We talk about the idea of achieving a level of clarity. It requires a certain kind of strength. And I'm not talking about the strength to move mountains. I'm not talking about nuclear power to blow things up. That's a different kind of strength. The pasuk in Mishlei reads, Ir prutza en choma, ish asher en me'atzer l'rucho. A man who does not restrain his own spirit is likened to a breached city without a protective wall. Right? What does that mean? You see, restraint is much more than just the power to hold back. It's about having a clarity, a vision as to who you are, who you want to be, and who you do not want to be. Having set up restraint is super important. I'll give you an example. Who's going to live a healthier, longer life? The person that has a very strict diet and is very meticulous about eating the right kinds of foods every single day versus someone who just eats whatever they want, whenever they want. So, the guy who's eating whatever he wants, whenever he wants, he's happy because he's eating pizza and burgers and fries all day, right? And we know where that's going to take him down the line. But someone who is living a life of restraint, someone who has created a protective boundary, a wall around themselves, has a very different experience in this world. So it's true they are living a life of restraint and that they may not have access to all the gluttonous foods that are available to you, but at the same time, they're living a lifestyle that's going to allow them to enjoy greater happiness over a longer duration of time. The midah of this particular soul trait, gevurah, means strength. Okay, you find it in different places. You can read it, an entire newspaper about how gevurah in the public life or in the private life, right? Are police using too much unrestrained power? This is a massive issue for us, the last couple of years. Should the government draw the line on certain behaviors that are happening in our society? What was the family too lax in their discipline? Where's the limit to display of sexuality on television advertising? Where do those boundaries come from? Right? Generally speaking, those boundaries are coming from a place of restraint. And restraint is not a bad thing. Restraint is an important thing. We all agree that if we lived in a world where you were given an unlimited credit card and were told to do whatever you want, that would be a very destructive thing, not a constructive thing. That the boundaries that we place on ourselves in society or even within our own lives are meant to help refine us so that we can become simply bigger and better human beings. A mom gets a phone call and the kid says, take me to the mall. Another kid says, yeah, I want a beanbag, it costs $500. Another kid says, I'm dropping out of the school and because I'm bored. And the mom says, okay, sure, no problem, I'll do all that for you. Is that a healthy mother or an unhealthy mother? Are we greater parents when we're able to create some level of restraint? Or maybe the approach is just to love, kill your kids with kindness and they'll become greater, better, stronger adults. Now, I have 6 kids, thank God. And my youngest, she's 5. She's very pretty, very smart. And I find that, I have a very difficult time saying no to her because she's just so yummy. And I often go through this meditation when she asks me for something and I really want to say yes, but I know it's bad for her. Like she already had 4 lollipops. I can't say yes to this one too. No, it never gets to 4. So I imagine her as a 25-year-old woman standing next to me, looking at this particular scenario that we're in right now. And I look at her and she looks at me and she says, Dad, don't give in to her, right? Imagine yourself for a moment as a child being in the room with your parent and all those times your parent just gave in to you. Wouldn't you have gone back and preferred for your parents to created some kind of a happy, healthy boundary for you? Because we recognize that those happy, healthy boundaries lead to healthier, greater, stronger people who have a level of discipline and restraint. So Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says as follows. He says, in Musar thought, strength that concerns us is not the power to move mountains, but the strength you need is to overcome your greatest challenge. What's your greatest challenge, my friends? What's the greatest stumbling block that we're always facing? It's ourselves. This is an especially important concern for our generation because we live surrounded by a culture that is exuberantly celebrates self-indulgence, the very opposite quality of self-restraint. It's true that not everyone needs to develop self-restraint. Some people are already masters of saying no to themselves, and would be a much better place to foster soul traits that help them loosen up. Still, everyone has much to gain from this exploration. Even if Gura is not a major issue in your spiritual curriculum at this time, exercising self-restraint has always been difficult. Maybe that's why a form of the word Gevura or Gibor, which means hero in Hebrew, right, is being used over here. Self-restraint is nothing less than a heroic act. Like, we know it's hard. Who doesn't want to go ahead and give into their desire? Who doesn't want to go ahead and give into the possibility of taking whatever it is around you and enjoying it? But the boundaries, my friends, is what allows us to become something bigger and better. Always giving into the indulgent desire of the body, of the mind, of the whatever, the eye, the ear, it will be destructive, has destructive consequences, not constructive consequences. You can be a hero by saying no to chocolate, or maybe it's coffee, maybe it's lottery tickets, maybe it's gambling, right? Or maybe it's Netflix binging, right? You can fill in your own dynamic challenge, right? Wherever you have a difficulty saying no to desire, this is where you need to use this power of Gevurah, of strength, to strengthen yourself to achieve some level of greatness and clarity beyond the needs of the body, the needs of the soul, having a vision as to what it means to be, again, the better, greater version of you. So there's a Breshit Rabbah that tells us the world would not exist but for desire, because without it, no one would have a child, build a house, or make a career. That there's something there, the desires are there, right? Not just to go ahead and distract us, but desire is actually there to help construct and build us, right? Now, but the picture changes drastically when desire is allowed to go unbridled, right? Without offense and limits, our otherwise healthy desire becomes a source of enslavement. Now, the Torah teaches us that, and it gives us many, many guidelines to help us restrain desire. Like we see this week's parasha: don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't covet. These are very clear attempts at curbing the things that we naturally want to do. We have inclinations for all sorts of things, but therefore the ta'ava, the desire, is not just random. The ta'ava, the desire, is there to create that pull. Remember that growth can only happen through a force that's pushing down against you and you pushing in the opposite direction. If I want to build muscles, the only way I can build muscles is by getting my weights that are really heavy and then doing my curls, right? And what I'm doing is I'm taking something that is putting downward pressure and I'm pushing against it. We all have ta'avot, we all have desires, we all have all sorts of things that are pushing us in the opposite direction. Our growth, our strength comes from overcoming those things. Now, I'm definitely not suggesting that we don't enjoy pleasure and we don't indulge in some things. Like, yeah, if you need a good steak, have a good steak. If you want an amazing ice cream because you want to relax or you want to reward yourself, that's totally fine. But when your whole life becomes a life of indulgence, right, it has, again, a very super destructive impact. So we know the Ramban tells us in this week's Parashat Kedoshim, right? We know the word Kedoshim means holiness. The Torah permits relations between husband and wife. Not necessarily true with original Christianity. Original Christians were not allowed to have any kind of marital intimacy at all, right? The Torah permits eating meat and drinking wine and having all kinds of amazing, pleasurable food. However, somebody with a strong desire can find the opportunity to be passionately addicted to all kinds of things, like sexual relations with his wife, or to become a drunkard or a glutton, or to speak, in a very negative kind of way, right? None of those things are technically forbidden by the Torah. All those things, a married man could be with his wife, and a married woman could be with his wife all the time, and there's no prohibition in drinking, there's no prohibition in eating a steak. But the result is that a person can become what we call an unsavory within the permissible realm of Torah, right? Becomes someone who is a unsavory person who is permitted to do all sorts of things. He's all called unsavory because that's not what the Torah's intentions were, right? The person is unsavory even though he's broken no law. The only thing that saves a person or him or her is the development of personal restraint, right? That personal restraint is what allows this person to grow into something bigger, better, and greater. So this is articulated most eloquently in the Tomer Dvorah. The Tomer Dvorah is a fascinating book about these Middot, okay? Moshe Cordovero is a 15th century Kabbalist from Tzfat, and this is a Kabbalistic / Musar work on the 13 traits that we've been discussing throughout these weeks. And this is what he says. This is a quote. He says, "How should a person habituate himself in the trait of Gevurah? The force of Gevurah is latent in the universe, and that when we overindulge our desires, the consequences is that this Gevurah, this energy, is stirred up. And that may come down as severe judgment, right? The way to avoid this externally imposed Gevurah is to exercise our own capacity for internal Gevurah. In other words, self-restraint." So he says like this, that the spiritual world that we live in has a mirror dimension. And therefore, everything in the physical realm is a mirror of something that's happening on a spiritual plane. If I live in a world of no restraint, what ends up happening is because God wants us to live in a world of balance, there's a energy of unrestraint that's sent up, and God sends down Gevurah to help us find that balance again. Now, there's two ways we're going to grow. I've said this before. We're either going to choose to grow, or circumstances are going to force us to grow. I don't want to be the person who is forced to grow through circumstance. That's very painful. It's also difficult to choose to want to grow. But it's much more profound and much more enjoyable knowing that you accomplish something by choice versus allowing the circumstance to get in the way of your personal growth and development. Now, this rule doesn't operate 100% of the time, right? We know from the fact that wrongdoers, right, sometimes do get away with all kinds of bad things in life. We call it tzaddik v'ralo, a righteous person who has bad things happening to them. And you have something called rasha, the evil man, v'tovlo, and it's good for him. But it definitely describes some of my own experiences of learning the hard way. Sometimes these results come immediately, right? You eat too much and boom, you're sick, right? We say that lips that leak lies can set up instant disasters. Sometimes severe judgment takes longer, right? I have someone who is I have a friend whose wife is a physician. She treats smokers with lung cancer, and the judgment arrives decades later, and it's ugly and disgusting. Okay, and it's painful. There is no choice to whether or not Gevurah exists in our life. It's there. You can't escape it. As a matter of fact, we know that Gevurah is an extension of din, of judgment. And the Torah says, the Midrash says, that God tried creating the world with chesed and saw that it could not. Tried creating the world with din, and He saw that it could not exist. We can't live in a world of just unbridled din. We can't live in a world of unbridled just Gevurah, of only restraint. Which is why then God used the force of chesed, which we spoke about weeks ago, as a compromise. What is the chesed that God created? The chesed is that we can make the choice to make the mistake and not be obliterated. And that God gives us the space to tap into the power of Gevurah. He gives us the power of choosing as to whether or not we want to live a life of restraints. This is an exercise in your free will. Self-restraint depends on your self-awareness. When you know yourself accurately and you're clear about who you are, or more importantly, who you want to be, or who you don't want to be. The more you clarify, the more greater the capacity for self-restraint becomes. Because desire is a very, very powerful thing. So you could use that in a profound way. If you have clarity as to who you want to become, of where you want to go, that desire can flip your whole entire day, your whole entire life. Talk about creating powerfully profound traits that allow you to have good habits of achieving greatness. This is what this midah is about. So you have to have a sense of whether it's simple restraint or more profound restraint is needed, but you choose what it looks like. You're deciding where you're taking this whole entire world of restraint. You choose where you want to achieve as far as what you want to achieve as far as your own personal greatness. Now, Musar is set up in a way where the way in which we do this is taking small steps. Tomorrow, I get this all the time. Rabbi, I decided I want to be religious. Tomorrow, I'm going to keep Shabbat. I'm going to put on tefillin. I'm going to keep kosher. And, I'm going to learn all day. And I say, that's a recipe for disaster. The way in which we grow is by taking small incremental steps for ourselves. Because, having a no-win is a complete failure. We want to set ourselves up for small successes, small moments of major achievements. And by doing that, we'll set ourselves up for greater and greater achievements. When Rabbi Yisrael Salanter wanted to help a longshoreman of Danzig to become an observant Jew on Shabbat, he didn't ask him to stop working that day. He didn't ask him to quit his job. He only suggested that he stop smoking while he worked. And I've seen this before. I had a student, his name was Dimitri. It was one of my birthright trips. This is in 2004. And he had a very profoundly powerful Shabbat experience in Jerusalem. He said to me, Rabbi, I really want to keep Shabbat, but I'm not a quitter. And I can't, and I smoke, and I'm not going to quit. So I said to him, this guy would chain smoke 4 packs. He would light 1 cigarette, just nonstop. And I said to him, Dima, I'm like, instead of trying to completely go cold turkey, why don't you smoke, 3.5 packs for Shabbat and see how that works for you? And then slowly decrease the amount of cigarettes you smoke. He called me about 8 months later. This is after the trip, and he told me, Rabbi, he's like, I want you to know, I am down to 1 pack of cigarettes on Shabbat, right? And now, it's been years later, he does not smoke at all on Shabbat. And for him, that is his Shabbat experience. That's where he's coming from. And God willing, he'll get closer and closer and closer. But it's about creating that restraint in that relationship within himself that allows him to achieve something much more profound. Now, there are 2 ideas that are prevalent in the world of psychology today. And that is that we have no choice because we are animals and everything has been pre-described in our brains. There's nothing specific about your free will. It's really just a lottery, and if you won having a good habits and good DNA, then you'll live a happy, healthy life. And if not, then you're stuck. There's nothing you can do to ever change it. You see this is true very much so in so much of therapy today. Just giving out medication for the sake of giving out medication, giving people drugs because no one wants to work through their issues. But we believe that all the issues that we have, all the challenges are there so that we can become a diamond. No pressure, no diamond. Gvura itself is there to help us create that necessary balance in our lives so that we could, again, become something bigger and better. So what can we do to sensitize ourselves to a world of restraint and gvura? How do we bring this message home to ourselves? How do we internalize this idea? So the first thing I want you to do this week, if you want to do this exercise, you'll enjoy it tremendously. Okay, the starting point of this week is what you're going to do is you're going to read the newspaper. Every day, read the newspaper. Okay? Search for stories that embody self-restraint, gvura. Maybe you'll come upon a story about someone who returned a valuable lost object rather than keeping it for themselves, or maybe a report about someone who blew the whistle on some corporate misbehavior, rather than actually join in, right? These would be examples where people exercise self-restraint. Now, unfortunately, newspapers tend to be much more interested in the opposite situation, right? Because pages are filled with these tales of sexual misconduct, greed, and gluttony, all of which usually revolves around someone who did not restrain themselves from a certain action. Now, as you read and follow these stories, right, which have the theme of Gvura in it, be on the lookout for one particular thing. Identify the limits or the lines that were being respected or exceeded. What line did the person who returned the lost object not cross? Or what is the line that the misbehaving politician did not observe? Right? Now, this is a simple thing you can do to bring Gvura into your life, because the idea is really just about having hakara, sensitizing yourselves. It's not enough of an assignment because it will sensitize you to know how important boundaries are in life. But if you really want to take a very deep, advanced level of owning this particular practice of bringing Gvura into your life, don't look for the lines and limits that represented the framework of Gvura, right? But also notice some of the stories that depict external, severe Gvura, the cause and effect of Gvura, right? Spend some time taking out a diary. Record in your notes. If you want to really grow with any trait, you need to spend the time writing down where you want to go and think about what you want to accomplish, right? Now, write down in your diary, today is Wednesday, and what I did today was I really wanted to get myself ice cream, but I did not. I'm exercising self-restraint. I really wanted to do X, Y, and Z today, but I didn't do it today because I wanted to show restraint. How are we exercising and building the restraint muscle in our lives? If we're always feeding the muscle of pleasure, of instant gratification, when the time comes for you to actually exercise restraint, that muscle will atrophy. So these are little things we can do on a day-to-day basis to help strengthen ourselves so that we are able to actually show that kind of restraint. Now, I want you to reflect on the stories as a mirror of your own life. How do the lines or boundaries that show up in the story relate to your own circumstances and surroundings? This is light meditation. Are you challenged to exercise self-restraint in that area too? How would you perform in that situation? What are you doing about it? How are you going about internalizing and visualizing these ideas and making it real for yourselves? Does anyone here believe that restraint is a bad thing? Right? Yeah, tell me why. Why was restraint a bad thing? Right? I don't think
because it tends to become frustrated.
It becomes frustrated because you're not getting what you want.
Yeah, never get what you want.
Okay, well,
from time to time.
Well, do you agree that what are examples where restraints are a good thing? And what are an example? You give me an example where restraint is a good thing, and give me an example of where not restraining is a bad thing.
Okay, restraint is a good thing with diet, alcohol and all that.
Okay.
Not restraining yourself is bad. Restraining yourself is bad when, like, you want to say something, but you always hold it because you don't want to say it.
Why is that a bad? You would agree that sharing everything at any time isn't always the best recipe for success in a relationship. That sometimes, most of the time, I would argue that we need to restrain what comes out of our mouths. Most of the time, we need to be careful about what we share, but we don't because it's too hard to hold it in. We have what we call shilshul hapeh. Proper translation would be the diarrhea of the mouth. We always want to share everything, but there are times where it's better to keep our mouth shut. Now, I'm not saying we can't share anything. Obviously, if you're going to share constructive things, b'chavod, share. But I would say 90% of the time, we're better off just staying silent. Most of the time, we're better off not sharing what we want to share. Unless what you're sharing is constructive, be careful about what you're sharing. Most of the time, what we share is often destructive. So I think that holding boundaries, self-control is strength. You want to talk about what is power? What does it mean to express real strength? What does that come from? That is what Ben Zoma says. Ezu hagibor hakovesh et yitzro. Who is strong? The one who's able to conquer his desires. By the way, it's harder to see with adults, Marie, but with children it becomes super clear, right? If I gave everything to my child, every desire, no matter how much I love them, Would I be helping that child or destroying that child? I think everyone here would agree we'd be destroying that child. Again, and I'm not saying that we should live a life of aestheticism where we remove ourselves from all pleasure. I'm not saying that at all. We believe that God created a world, litaneg ba'ashem. God created the world so we can have pleasure in everything in the world. But it can't just be pleasure for pleasure's sake. Enjoy the pleasure to grow, to develop yourself. Enjoy the pleasure so you could go ahead and give back and refresh yourself. But it's pleasure for pleasure's sake, it becomes destructive, not constructive. You see this in I see this so much with the college students today. College students today have no concept of anything. I mean, like you and I, Marie, for sure, you remember, we grew up in a world where we had a camera with film in it. Remember what film was? You took a picture. You had no idea what was on the picture, right? There was no way to see the instant result of the picture. You had to wait until you had your 32 roll or 24 roll of film, take it to the lab. Then you took like a week or two sometimes to wait till you get the pictures back, and then sometimes you got a bunch of blanks, or the picture was off center. Excuse me, or the color wasn't right. We had to wait. What's that?
Oh, you look terrible.
Or you look terrible and you're stuck with a bad picture. How many pictures did we throw out growing up as kids? Right? There was no Uber Eats. I could sit at my house and have something delivered from anywhere, in the city at least, to my office. We had to plan ahead for meals. I didn't grow up with a microwave in my house, even though microwaves were around. Like if I wanted to heat something, there was time. I had to boil water, and there was it was just a different world of patience. And that patience led to a level of strength and bandwidth that I feel that many in this generation do not have. Because when you live in a world where you're constantly getting what you want over and over and over again, you weaken yourself. And I'll give you another example of this. The Gemara tells a story around Tisha B'Av, the story of Martha. Martha was I forget her father's name. What did I say? Horkinus ben something. Her father was a fabric dealer, and she never walked on the street. Wherever she walked, there was a guy in front of her unlaying silk. So every step she took in her whole life, she was stepping on silk fabric. Okay, her whole life. Until Tisha B'Av happens, where the Jews have a civil war in Jerusalem, and then they're burning all the storehouses, and there's the famine happening. And the Gemara tells a story about how she went out to look for food, and she ends up stepping on feces, right? On some animal, manure. And this experience ends up killing her. She dies from having this experience. Right? Why? Well, you've created a reality for a person to live on this high level of comfort. Her having to deal with the stress of having something so foul on her, she can't handle it. She just drops dead. Now, obviously, I don't know if it's literal or just a legend that we tell to talk about the dangers of extreme wealth and extreme comfort. But I think the message is true. We all recognize that when we live in a world with restraints, we live in a world where we're able to create boundaries for ourselves. Even if I have the ability of giving my kids the power of walking on silk all day, I would never do it because I'd be making them weaker. I would never give my kids anything they wanted because I know I'd be not helping them. The power to struggle is a good thing, not a bad thing. And sometimes self-imposed restraint is a powerful thing. Do you put limits on your phone? How much phone time you're using? How much FaceTime you have? How many apps do you use that you just waste your time? Remember, restraint is not a bad thing. Restraint is your friend. Real power, my friends, is creating boundaries. I can't say that enough to each of you. So when we talk about building a world of gvura, of strength, we're talking about creating the balance of knowing when to say yes and when to say no. A person who always says no, that's not healthy either. A person who's always saying no to everything, that's not good. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the healthy amount of no and the healthy amount of yes that allows you to live a life of tiferet, of balance. That is what we're aiming for. But it's so easy to lean into the world of chesed, to lean into the world of just do whatever you want, the world of oneg and pleasure. And therefore not building the muscle of restraint, which ends up destroying us. So my hope and prayer for each of you here today is that you're able to internalize this idea of restraint. We're right now in the month of Iyar. This is the month of Omer, the month of where the students of Rabbi Kiva's students died. They died because they lacked the ability of showing restraint and showing of kavod to their friends. They just judged everyone negatively. They didn't want to give anyone the time of the day. They died because of the lack of hakarat hatov and a lack of seeing every single person as in having the tzelem Elokim. This was the destruction of that generation. We still mourn that destruction. That's why this beard is going to get uglier and uglier every time you log on for the next, 6 weeks or 5 weeks left, right? We're mourning the fact that humanity got themselves to a place where they simply destroyed themselves because they had no gevura, no strength, no balance. My question to you again is, what are you doing to bring this level of power and restraint, this power of gevura into your lives, into your family's lives? It's so important. Do not fall prey to the cute smiles and stares of those young kids. Figure out a way of being a balanced person that says no sometimes and yes sometimes. And what you'll be doing in kind is giving your children the ability of having the best habits possible to express the best versions of themselves. This is what the Torah wants. The Torah says keep Shabbat not because it wants to limit you. Oh, it's so annoying, Rabbi. I can't light a fire. I can't warm up my food. I can't, go out. I'm stuck at home. Yes, it's true. It does those things. It is difficult. But if you're prepared, there's nothing more liberating than a Shabbat. There's nothing more profoundly powerful than having all your meals set up. There's nothing more profoundly beautiful than having a space where you, your family, your children, who have the boundaries of no phones, no external distractions, who sit together as a family and speak and share and build. So it's true that with restraint comes shackles that prevent you from doing the things that you want to do for yourself. But remember that it also gives you this liberated expression and power to do things you would never be able to do for yourself. I see this true even with the laws of Taharat Mishpacha, the laws of family purity. It's hard. What do you mean, I can't touch my wife certain times in the month? That's crazy. Oh, Rabbi, it's so hard for me, I can't do it. And I say, listen, it's a mistake you're making. You think that having more is better, that more options, more opportunities is better. And I don't think that's true. Sometimes more is less and less is more. And I'll end with the following study. They did a study of, about 6 or 7 years ago. It was in the Wall Street Journal. They took 10,000 couples in the United States of America who were married with 2 children or more and asked them how often they are intimate with one another within 30 days. Surprisingly, the number of times married couples with 2 children or more together is about once a month. What's that?
Less than the religious Jews.
It's once a month. Once a month.
Yeah.
Right? Now, they found in the same study that a small subgroup of 67 couples with 2 or more children, were averaging intimacy about 6 times a month. Now, what do they all have in common? They were all married, children, 2 or more, but they were also all Orthodox Jews. What do all those Orthodox Jews have in common? Well, they have something called Taharat Mishpacha, right? They have these family purity laws. But Rabbi, doesn't that take away your pleasure? And the answer is, nope, sorry, you got it all wrong. You see, boundaries does not take away from anything in life. It actually gives you more. Another example. This is another example. Ready? Someone who's super careful about their time and super mindful about their schedule. Do they have less time or more time to do the things that they want? They have more time because they're so organized, right? The person who's dieting has a happier, healthier life. A person who's living a life of Torah values, where he's keeping the laws of Taharat Mishpacha, you would think that he has less opportunity of being with his or her spouse, but we find the opposite is true. Boundaries give us more. You have no boundaries, you walk away with less, my friends. So if you want to understand real strength is not doing whatever you want. Real strength is knowing when to say yes and when to say no. Real strength is about building the boundaries necessary to live a life of meaning and depth. That's what real Gvura is about. Not to an extreme of always saying no. That's not what I mean. What I really mean, what we're really talking about today, is finding that proper balance so that you can have everything in this world. I want you to have everything. I want you to have all the pleasure. I want you to have everything the world has to offer. But just be mindful of the following thing. This is the way the body works, okay? If I take my hand and leave my finger in the palm of my hand long enough, what's going to happen? I am not going to, it won't feel it anymore. I'll become numb to that touch. I won't feel it. But if there's constant change, right, it'll always be there. When we are constantly putting ourselves in a situation where we're constantly getting the same stimuli and pleasure over and over again without boundary, we no longer feel it. It's like the drug user or the alcoholic who has to drink more and more, take more and more drugs to get that high. Our bodies become desensitized to the external stimuli. So in the Torah's genius, it created a system that says, my friends, create boundaries for yourself. Don't say whatever you want to say. Shmirat halashon. Don't look at whatever you want. Create boundaries for the eyes, for the ears, for the mouth. Create boundaries with your time. Create boundaries with your work-life balance, Shabbat and the work week. Create boundaries between you and your spouse. And you think that you're actually going to lose out, and I'm telling you the opposite is true, and you all know it here. All of you will agree that the people who live a life with boundaries, okay, end up having more. Okay, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I keep the Torah. I do everything it says. Okay, do you think I'm missing out on any experience? I don't think so. I don't think I'm missing out on anything. If anything, I would argue that I'm living a more meaningful, more deeply passionate, pleasurable life than most people on planet Earth. I have everything that I have. I have 6 beautiful children. I have a stunning wife. I live in a beautiful home. I get to meet with beautiful people and share amazing ideas. I get to do the coolest things in the world, right? And that's coming from a world of restraint and boundaries, not an extreme state of boundaries, right? Of course, there's a time where you can have all the pleasures in the world. There's a time where you could have that ice cream, a time where you could have that steak, a time you could have that intimacy. But if it's done in the right way, you end up having much, much more. The boundaries do not limit. They create an expansive funnel for you to have much, much more. Wishing you an amazing week of Gvura, of strength, hoping that each of you find that proper balance so you could indulge in the world but not be destroyed by that indulgence. So you could create the space for you to appreciate all the nuances of all the pleasure in life, but not lose out on what it means to be truly you and yourselves. Shabbat Shalom. Have a great week, everybody.